This is how I prep my mix sessions. First thing I'm going to do before I change anything is save a new version. That way I can always go back to the original. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this mix sessions. And that way, as I have a different session for like mix 1, mix 2, they're all going to be saved to the same place in this folder, and it's going to be really nice and organized. So I'll just call this session song title mix 01. Step 1 is done. Next, I'm going to check in on the plugins and the samples to make sure everything's pulling correctly. So it looks like all the samples pulled. It looks like there's a couple of plugins that didn't pull correctly. I'll typically go over the plugins that artists are using in their projects beforehand so that I kind of know what I'm getting into. And in this case, it looks like it's just a couple of instances of auto-tune and G-clip. And when I'm going over these plugins with an artist, I'll usually check and see if I have that exact plugin or a really close replacement. I'll see if maybe I can actually just go and get the plugin. Especially in this case, I think G-clip is actually free, so I can go and download it if I want to. Or if those aren't options, like maybe the plugin isn't around anymore, I'll just get the artist to freeze or bounce that track to audio. Once we've taken care of the samples and plugins and that notification is gone, I'll bounce out a version of this track as is. Shift Command R. This also allows me to double check that I'm running at the same sample rate. I'm going to create another new folder and I'm going to call this one Mix Versions. And now as we have like mix session 1, mix session 2, and I'm bouncing out each version to send to the artist, I have all the bounces from those mix sessions all saved in this folder, nice and organized. I would just call this bounce song title and then pre-mix. This version of the mix is important to bounce out because it kind of gives me like a home base in terms of the artist's best attempt at mixing or, mixing and mastering their own track. So I can get an idea of how loud they want certain elements. And it also gives us a mix to try and beat, right? As I'm going through the mix and I'm making certain decisions with like EQ, compression, saturation, whatever, I can flip back and forth between the current mix and that pre-mix version and just make sure that all the decisions that we're making are for the better and it's making the track actually better and not worse. So once that's finished bouncing, I'm going to load up Metric AB onto my master channel here and I'm going to load in that pre-mix. I'm going to change this option to sync, and that way as I'm playing through the different sections of the mix here, Metric AB can also play that exact same section of this track. Of course, you don't have to do it this way with Metric AB. You can just create a new audio channel, set the output to external out so it just bypasses all of your master processing, and then load in the pre-mix version up top here. Just make sure that as you're going through the mix, you're gain matching so it's a fair comparison. This plugin also allows me to monitor a ton of different stuff, stereo image, loudness. Next, I'm going to organize the session a little bit. So I'm actually going to go in, I'm going to check out the different channels, see how everything's routed, how everything is grouped so that all the groups are set up the way that I'm used to running these sessions. All my drums are together, kicks together, my bass stuff is together, effects, vocals, and then I go through and color code so that as I'm navigating through the project, it's really easy for me to find stuff just based on color. After everything is organized and color coded, I'm going to load a couple more plugins onto the master chain here. The first one is going to be Vision, and this is a spectrum analyzer that allows me to get a detailed look at the low end, and I can check, relative levels of the kick and the bass. I can make sure there's no like weird phasing stuff going on. Next is SonarWorks. This is just EQ correction software for my room so that I can make sure when I'm playing the track out of my monitors, I'm hearing as close as I can to a flat response. And last is a VU meter. I'm going to put this before Metric AB. And the goal with this plugin is to make sure that we're starting each mix at the same relative volume. This is set to negative 18 dB full scale. And we want the loudness to be averaging around this 0 mark here. So it looks like we're coming in pretty loud. And it might be as simple as just highlighting these two channels and dragging down the volume until we get to that 0 mark. But likely what I'd do just to double check is go into the individual channels and groups here and make sure that all the gain staging within the channels and the groups is looking good too. After we've got that set up, I can delete VU meter. We don't need it the rest of the project, and I can start mixing.